In this screen capture video, I'm going to show you how to create an online survey for free using Google Drive. If you have a Gmail account, Google Drive is readily available to you. In your Gmail account, there'll be a tab, Drive, at the very top that you can find. Or if you don't have a Gmail account, you can easily set one up for free, of course, by going to gmail.com. If I did that here, you can always press the red button, create an account. Once you have a Gmail account, you go to drive.google.com, like that, enter your username and password, sign in, and you'll be taken to the screen like this, except there'll be a lot fewer files listed. Now, first, a little thing about what Google Drive is. Google Drive is essentially Google's version of Microsoft Office. So it's word processing software. The difference is it's free and it's hosted online. Good thing about Google Drive is if you're ever buying a new computer and you need word processing software and you don't want to spend $150 or whatever, however much Microsoft Office is, you don't really have to if you have access to the internet, steady internet access, steady internet connection. You can just use Google Drive to create documents and spreadsheets for free. So if I come here and press the create button, I'm going to see there's a bunch of different stuff corresponding to what you would find in Microsoft Office. You have documents, presentations, it's like PowerPoint, spreadsheets, it's like Excel, and then there's a few other things. This is what we're going to be using. It's a Google Docs form, basically a survey that you can distribute for free online. There's other survey software available, something called SurveyMonkey. There's some other stuff. Some of that usually costs something, not very much, but it does cost something. This has the advantage of being free. It's not quite as versatile or as powerful as those, but it's pretty good for being free. So I'm going to, if you're creating your survey from scratch, you go create form, and it's going to take you to this template here. Now at this point, you should have, in the previous assignment, written out the 7 questions in your survey as instructed. So you should have your introductory paragraph that I gave you. You should have the 5 demographic questions, and then there are 2 questions at the end. You might have more, but at least 2 questions at the end that address what people's perceptions of the answers to your research question. Then many of those, not all of them, many of them will be statements that people will agree or disagree with. So the first thing is to title the survey. I can do that here, and I put my last name, first initial, and then if you go back to the previous assignment, you look at what the introductory text is. Survey we need some way of introducing people to the survey. If they come into it cold, they might be confused, and so you want to find the introductory paragraph that I provide here. Note also that it's important in a survey to remind people that their answers are confidential, so you're not going to tie their answers back to the person individually. That's really important. Part of the ethics of social science research is that we honor the privacy of the respondents. Another thing we emphasize is that if somebody does not want to answer a question for any reason, they should feel free to do so. And if they don't want to take the survey, they should feel free to do so. So we're not going to force them to do anything or coerce them into doing anything. And we should not just not do those things, but we should let people know that we're not going to do those things so they don't feel like they're being coerced. It might sound sort of silly, but the idea is, in the history of research, there were occasions where scientists made it seem as though people didn't have any choice about what to do, and that kind of thing gives science a bad name. People should feel like they have complete freedom to exit at any time if they feel uncomfortable. So this is a little introductory paragraph that I copied and pasted into that first box there, and then now I'm going to start creating questions. Okay, so let's take the very first question in the survey, which should be gender. Okay, I can show you how to create the gender question. I can replace this template simple question 1 with what is your gender. You can leave the help text blank because it's a pretty simple question. I'll change the question type to a multiple choice. You know, there's different question types here, and we're going to use a number of them, not all of them, but a number of them. Multiple choice forces the person to choose one answer, whereas checkboxes allows them to choose more than one answer. For gender, we're going to force people to choose by going to multiple choice like that, and then we have two options, male or female. And when I'm done, I click on done, and now it gives you a little sense of what the question is going to look like. Now I go down to the next question, which is race ethnicity. Now for this question, we're asking people, how would you identify yourself? And we're telling them they can choose more than one category if they identify themselves with more than one. In this way, we're following the census. Not that many people identify with more than one category, but we give the people option to do that. So I can copy and paste this question. Note that, let's say if in yours this is not here, let's trash that. What would you do to add a new question? Come up here to add item, and I'm going to choose, in this case, checkboxes, and it creates a new template there. I can Control V to paste that text in there about race. And now what I want to do is enter in the different categories. Asian or Asian American, Black or African American, and so on. Oops. Always Control Z to undo. For the other option, we can actually click on this Add Other, which allows people to check on that and then actually enter in whatever they want. Okay. Note too that I didn't mention this with the previous question, but there's this box, make this a required question. Don't check that off. The reason is if you check that, basically it makes the form kind of like the websites that will ask you for your payment information, where if you leave one piece of information out and you press submit, it won't let you go on. It'll just go back and give you an error. So you have to fill that in. So we don't want to make this a required question. None of the questions should be required. Again, that goes back to what I said earlier. All the questions should, people should be feel free to answer or not answer any of the questions. So press done, and now it shows you a little bit how it's going to look. Note the difference here. The circles from the multiple choice force a certain answer. The person has to choose one or the other. With race, they can choose more than one, and that's the difference between the multiple choice and the checkboxes option. So the next one, how old are you in years? Here we're going to enter this as a text item, so I can click on Add Item, Text. If you choose multiple text, or paragraph text rather, you're going to get a very big box there. It's obviously a lot bigger than you need for age. I can press the trash can there to get rid of it. What I want is just text, which is relatively short. Paste the question in, and there you go. We could even, if we press this pencil here, we can edit the question. You could enter a little help text and just enter the number in years. You don't have to do that, but you'd be surprised at how much variation you get in responding. It's always the case with this question that sometimes you get people entering their birthday. They're just going through it really quickly and they're not thinking through it. This is why oftentimes surveys will include multiple choice questions, because you give people any latitude, and you're going to have some people deviate from what you want, and then you end up with something that's kind of a mess, especially if you have hundreds of responses. So the next question, what is the highest level of education you've completed at this time? Again, add item, and this is going to be a multiple choice because it's a mutually exclusive answer categories. And, oops, that's the wrong question. Highlight, copy and paste. What is the highest level of education you've completed at this time? And then, again, go through these various answer categories. Best than high school, secondary school, high school degree or GED, and so on. Note that these categories actually were pretty carefully designed to try to include everybody. The problem with, when you try to come up with a question, it's actually, say about education, it's actually harder than it looks, because you're going to think about some of the categories you're most familiar with, but there's oftentimes there are people who have some level of education doesn't quite fit, so they have some degree that doesn't quite fit into college, or it doesn't quite fit into high school, something like that, or it's a degree from another country. You have to anticipate these things. That's why, for example, here it says associate's degree or technical degree. We're trying to anticipate that some people's degrees aren't going to fall within the usual categories. That becomes a problem on surveys, because if people get confused or frustrated because they can't fit themselves into your categories, then they just don't answer the question, and then you're left with missing data. And I should mention that as you're going along here, it's really important to press the save button over here, because what I've done here so far, if I somehow get closed out of this browser or something happens to the computer, it's probably going to all disappear and you have to do it again. So you want to save as often as you can as you're going through here. The other thing to watch for is if I go back in here with edit and pencil, sometimes people are thinking there's another category or something, and they'll go down here, they click on that, click to add option, then I press done, and now there's some blank spaces down here. Somebody, just to annoy you, might choose those. So you want to make sure to not leave any orphan categories like that. And the fifth question is about the respondent's parents' education, and it's going to have the same answer categories here. So you can create that in the same way. I'm going to skip that for now and go down to question 6 and question 7, because those are going to be structured in a little bit different way. Now, I should mention that this template I use here, or I'm basically, what we're doing is trying to find out what people perceive as to be the answer to the research question. So we're trying to compare what people think versus what the scholars think. So what lay people versus scholars. Lay people in this case are just friends and acquaintances of yours that you can get to do the survey. This sort of template here, this is a very common survey question where somebody will give you a statement and then indicate, and then ask you to tell them, do you agree or disagree with that statement, how strongly or not that you agree with that. It's called a Likert item. So for example, let's say you want to know somebody's opinion about abortion. So you have a statement that says abortion is not, or shouldn't be permitted in any circumstance. Do you strongly agree, somewhat disagree, or strongly disagree? With that kind of question, you can get a sense of how pro-choice or how pro-life someone is. Okay, that's not going to fit everybody's case, but it should fit a lot of them. So remember here, you're just having a statement here and then asking them whether they agree or disagree. So you shouldn't have an actual question. It should be written as a statement with a period, not a question mark at the end. That's important. Otherwise, people might get a bit confused. And to do that, we're going to use one of the nice items here that works well with this. It's called a grid, so add item grid. And we're going to want to have 4 columns, okay? And each of these columns is going to be a different category here. So I have strongly agree, somewhat agree, somewhat disagree, and strongly disagree. Okay, and then in the question title, what I'm going to do is say, and yours might, again, this I wouldn't necessarily follow this verbatim because in certain cases it might not work out. So you want to make sure that what you're doing works for what questions you're writing work for the kind of information you're getting. But this is just an example. So you might write here, for each statement below, indicate whether you strongly agree, somewhat agree, somewhat disagree, or strongly disagree. Now, this statement, it seems kind of convoluted, like why do you have to write it out? But there's actually a specific reason for that. So why do I have to say, indicate whether you strongly agree, somewhat agree, blah, blah, blah. All the answer categories are going to be right there in those columns. The reason is because the thing to know is the way you ask a question, a research question, or rather, a survey question, it has a big influence on how people respond. I'll give you an example. When they ask people, and they've done it for a long time, on the General Social Survey, a big social survey done since 1972, ask people, do you think there should be the amount of spending on welfare is too much, about the right amount, or too little? So most people say it's too much. So in other words, when they're asked, government spending too much money on welfare, people say too much. On the other hand, other people get the slightly different question. They get a question that says, is the government spending too much, about the right amount, or too little on assistance to the poor? Assistance to the poor, most people say government spending too little. Now, doesn't seem to make a lot of logical sense because welfare and assistance to the poor are essentially the same thing. There's not a real clear difference between those two things, but they clearly mean different things to people, so that when you ask about welfare, most people are opposed to more of it and want less of it. You ask about assistance to the poor, most people want more of it. So what's the public really think about that issue? Well, it's very determined by the survey question. So you have to be really careful in how you answer, rather how you ask survey questions. And related to this, oftentimes, maybe an amateur survey question writer might write something like, do you agree with the following statement? You don't want to say that, just do you agree? Because as it turns out, respondents, people, they typically want to please the interviewer, even if the interviewer is not there. They want to seem to be agreeable, most people. So if you say something like, do you agree with this statement, it kind of implies that you want them to agree with it, even if you don't really want them to agree with it. So they're more likely to say that they agree. So for that reason, that we don't ask people to indicate whether you agree. We actually list all the categories, so it doesn't appear that we're favoring one over the other, and that's what I'm doing here. So indicate whether you strongly agree, somewhat agree, etc. Okay. The same thing if you're asking somebody whether they attend religious services or how often they attend. You don't want to make it seem as though you really, it's better if they do or better if they don't. You want to give them all the options so that they feel like they're just choosing among the options and they don't care. That's a big challenge with survey research, because a lot of times people's responses are based, yes, in part on their own behavior and their own attitudes, but also partly based on just wanting to please the interviewer and get it over with, or just give the interview or give the survey what they want to hear. And we want to avoid that. We want to try to get people to actually give their own attitudes, not just what they think we want to hear. Because what we really want to hear is their own attitudes, not something that they're just doing because they think it's socially desirable. Okay, so here we have part of this done. I'm just going to press done here so you can see what it's going to start to look like. Okay, I can go into I'm going to save that just in case something happens. Press the pencil to re-enter it, start to edit it, and then I can enter my statements in the rows. So, you know, it might have a statement like abortion should be outlawed in all cases, something like that, under no circumstances. You want to play with the words in the survey a little bit, because the challenge here is oftentimes some of the things you might be dealing with in your research question are things that the public doesn't necessarily have a lot of information about. One rule is you don't want to assume that people know almost anything. Okay, so you want to spell everything out. Don't use big words. Don't use jargon. Everything should be written very carefully in a common language. So, you know, a word like recidivism, right? Or something that refers to something you might see in a sociology or criminology textbook, and you wouldn't see somewhere else. That's a bad idea. You want to spell things out in a way that would be perfectly understandable to, you know, your grandmother, your grandfather. Okay, that's important, because if people don't know what you're talking about, then you're not going to get very good information. Now, to finish this out, I can enter another statement here. You know, we could have abortion should be legal in all circumstances. Okay. Sometimes you can give statements that are contradictory like this and see how people respond, make sure they're paying attention. Because, you know, the response to any particular question, if it's not a factual question, is often plagued by errors that people are just going through quickly, and they can randomly select something that they don't really care about just to finish the survey. So sometimes it's good to have multiple questions on the same topic, because then you get a sense about, okay, is that person just randomly responding, or do they really believe what they're saying? So if I press done here, then you can see how this shows up. The grid option here makes it more condensed, so you don't have to have the answer choices repeated. Instead, it's just nice compact grid. And of course, you could have more statements. And I'm going to press save here, and now I have the beginnings of a survey. Once I'm done here, I can actually just close this out. But before doing that, I want to show you one other thing. That is, if I go to more actions and edit confirmation, this edit confirmation box is the text the person gets when they click on submit, when they submit the survey. You know, you can leave it as is, or you can change it. Just say, you know, thank you for taking my survey. Remember that your responses will be kept confidential. Okay, something along those lines. You can save that. It's taking a rather long time to save. So now, if I X out of that, what I see here is, what you should see is back in this Google Drive box is to see the form you just created. And I can go back into that by opening it up, just clicking on it. Now what you'll see is, what you should see is, your questions arrayed along the first row of the spreadsheet here. And when you start collecting responses, the responses will appear in the spreadsheet below, along with the timestamp of when they conducted the survey. But as you can see, there's no actual reference to any identifying information. Now, to get back to the form itself, if you want to edit it, what you'll probably need to do at some point, if you get feedback from me or otherwise, you go back to the form menu here, and you can click on Edit Form, and you can go back in and you can always use the pencil to edit any of these individual questions. You can add questions. You can move them around. You can see like that. Okay. You always want to remember as you're doing this to click Save, or else you can lose your work. Unfortunately, it's one of the only parts of Google Drive that doesn't save itself automatically very often. Okay. When you're all finished, you have all your questions, and you've gotten feedback from me, and you've been careful to look through the survey and make sure it's okay, you can actually go to the live survey by again going to that form menu, go to live form. Now, when you note this also says accepting responses, which means it's ready to go. And now this is what the form will look like for people when they see it. And then this is actually, this long internet address is actually the link that we will be using. But we're going to shorten that link. Actually, it's important to shorten that link because this is just way too long to give people. But before doing that, I'm going to go back to the survey itself. The most important thing you need to do after you've created the survey is to actually share it with me. So you can't turn this in on Blackboard. It doesn't mean you're not going to get a grade for it, you will. But the way to share it with me is to go up to this little blue share box, and if you put your mouse over it, it'll say private, put your cursor over it, it'll say private only to only me. You want to share it, and in this case what you'll do is you can add people, and what you should do is add my username and at gmail.com. Okay, and then when you click on the share and save, then I'll be able to see it and take a look and make sure that everything's okay. So that's another actual feature that's really nice about Google Drive as opposed to Microsoft Word, is if you're working collaboratively on something with, you can easily share it with as many or as few people as you want. You can share it with the world if you want and send them a link to it. Microsoft Word, there's various capacities with the SkyDrive and stuff, but it's not nearly as easy to share documents as it is in Google Drive. The final thing I want to show you is once you have my OK and you've gotten the survey set up, again, you want to go to, once the survey is basically polished and ready to go, and I really do emphasize being really careful before you send it out, because the last thing you want is 20 responses to questions that aren't very good or don't give you what you want, and then to go and do it over again or use something that doesn't really give you much. Again, you go to that form menu and go to live form. Now I can highlight and take this whole link here, and what I'm going to do is I want to use what's called a link shortener to shorten that link. You may have seen these link shorteners. There's a couple different ones. One of them is called bit.ly, B-I-T-L-Y, and it's B-I-T-L-Y. Okay, and all you have to do is then Control V that link that we just got, right? And click on the shorten button. And now it gives you this, which is a shortened link that you can then spread around on Facebook or by email or Twitter, whatever, and that link will take you to take people to your survey directly. And I can test that here by copying and pasting that link here, and as you can see, it takes people right there. Okay, and that's about it. Good luck in creating your surveys.